everyone, and welcome to another Real Rugby video this week. Last week I received some very good feedback on my all-time greatest Springbok 15. This week I'm doing something a little bit different. I am picking the greatest Springbok side you can select from players that have only played one test for the Springboks. So I'm calling it the One-Hit Wonders Springbok 15, and I will only look at players that have either come off the bench or started in one test. So similar format to the previous videos that I've done. I'm not going to do a short list and rank players. I'll throw some names out there and ultimately tell you as much as I can about every single player that I have picked in every position. But before I get into it, I want to give a big shout out and a thank you to the team over at CBX for sponsoring this week's video. CBX is the #1 Alcatel-Lucent unified communication specialist in Southern Africa. They have integrity and they are proud of their work as well as passion for what they do. They always strive to optimize your return on investment and make your communications work for you. So go and check out CBX on their website and their social media in the links below. A big thank you to the team over at CBX. They're big rugby fans and big supporters of this channel, so a big thank you. I also want to take this opportunity to tell everybody about Real Rugby's Patreon page. Now, if you like what Real Rugby does and what we stand for, and you'd like to, make a contribution and support this channel, go and check out Patreon. We're going to make some content available that's not going to be seen on YouTube, some full matches, some unique highlights, and some more rare footage that you're not going to see on YouTube. So if you want to support this channel, we'd greatly appreciate it. Go and check out our Patreon page. The link is in the description below. Okay, getting into the teams. So looking at players that have only played one test for the Springboks. At fullback, there's a couple of names that ring a bell. This is all, before my time, going way back in Springbok history. Guys like Ray Carlson comes up, who played against England in 1972, and Bunny Reid, who played in 1933 against Australia. But I went with Archie Marsberg at fullback. He was first selected for the Springboks in that famous 1906 side of Paul Roos. At fullback, he didn't play in a test. He made his test debut in 1910, and he was known for his fearless tackling. Fullbacks played a very, very different type of rugby more than a century ago, and apparently, from what I could research and read about Archie Marsberg, was that he was a fearless defender and he was well thought of amongst his peers. So one capped wonder from 1910 at fullback, I've picked Archie Marsberg. On the right wing, a couple of names that stand out that I recognize was Ben Piet van Zyl, Travis Ishmael, who played against Wales in 2018, Jack Hartley, one of the Morkels, Pieter Morkel. But I went with one guy. It's got to be Hermanus Potgieter. He scored that fantastic try against the World 15 in 1977, and it's a shame that he didn't get a chance to play more tests for the Springboks because he was unbelievable. I'll make a point of getting that try up on the Real Rugby channel at some point for the people that haven't seen it. He only played the one test, which was in 1977, but fantastic player who played for Free State. The old players that played with him speak very, very highly of Hermanus Potgieter, and based on that one performance alone, I think he beats everybody else in the selection. So I went with Hermanus Potgieter on the right wing. On the left wing, there's more to pick from. So there's a couple of names that I recognized. Hasie Versveld, Jumbo Lengo, who recently played for the Springboks in 2016. Another Morkel and Andrew Kaya-Molitano, who went to the World Cup in 1999. Darius Botha, Nas's brother, who played one test against the All Blacks in 1981. But I ultimately went with Jock van Niekerk, who made his debut for the Springboks against the All Blacks in 1928, and apparently from what I could research, he had a long stride, a terrific swerve, and a handoff like a kick of a mule. So very strong, like a proper wing. He could step, he could swerve, and Doc Craven thought very, very highly of Jock van Niekerk. So very little is known about him, and obviously there's no footage available on him, but he was highly, highly rated by somebody like Doc Craven, whose opinion I think everybody should always take very, very seriously. So I went with Jock van Niekerk on the left wing, who made his only test appearance in 1928. At outside center, there's a couple of names that sort of stood out. Billy Senden is a name that rings a bell from 1921. Sharky Osler, obviously from 1928, but I went with Dirk Vroeneman, also from that 1977 Springbok side that took on the World 15 at Loftus. A stalwart in Free State Rugby for many, many years. Again, somebody that probably could have played more tests if South Africa had played more regularly during the 70s and the 80s. So it's a shame that he only played one test, but again, a highly, highly regarded player, specifically at provincial level. And, you know, he played very, very well that day in 1977. So I'm going with Dirk Vroeneman on the outside center. At inside center, a couple of interesting names like John Dobie, Bernie Duffy, Spanner Forbes, all names that I recognize. Christo Wagenaar, also from that 1977 side. But I had to go with Ruan Janse van Rensburg, who made his debut for South Africa against Wales in 2016. It baffles me how this guy has not played more tests for South Africa. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's a powerful runner. You know, his game isn't perfect, but he's an explosive player. And I would have loved to seen him play for South Africa a lot more. As well as the centers have done in the recent World Cup win, you know, I always thought that he should be in the mix. I think he's just a fantastic talent. It's sad that he left to play for Sale, and he's been in the news recently for the wrong reasons, but it doesn't take away from his capabilities on the field. He's a fantastic, fantastic player, and I'd love to see him back in the box side. He's still young. I think he can still play a couple of tests for South Africa, and, you know, I hope that happens. So I went with Ruan Janse van Rensburg at inside centre. At fly half, there's Marnitz Boshoff, who played against Scotland in 2014, Robert de Preer, who played against Wales in 2018, and a couple of lesser-known names, but I went with Robbie Blair, again from that 1977 side that played against the World 15 at Loftus. Robbie Blair, people that, you know, support Western Province will know him and speak fondly of him. He was a highly, highly regarded player at provincial level when the Currie Cup really was, you know, probably the strongest domestic competition in the world. He played many, many seasons for Western Province. If it wasn't for the likes of Gerald Bosch and then later Nas Botha, he probably would have played more tests for South Africa. So he only has the one, but he acquitted himself very, very well on that day in August in 1977. So yeah, I went with Robbie Blair, you know, very familiar name and a legend of South African rugby. So he's at fly half. At scrum half, there was quite a lot of names to pick from. The ones that stood out, which I recognize, was Mannetjies Gericke, Barry Wolmerans, Tommy Hobson, Jack Immelman, Norman Jordan in 2002, Louis Schroeder, more recently Dan van Zyl against England in 2000. But I ultimately went with Charles McLeod, who played one test for the Springboks in 2011. He was a decent Super Rugby player and Currie Cup player. It's a shame that he played behind the likes of Fourie de Preer, you know, he and Ruan Pienaar as well. So he never really got the opportunities to show what he could do at test level. Unfortunately, he played in a very forgettable test in 2011, and he didn't even go to the World Cup that year. But, you know, he was a very, very good scrum-half. I remember his performance in the 2010 Currie Cup final was something to remember. So out of the list of names, you know, I'm happy to go with Charles McLeod at scrum-half. Going into the forward pack, at number 8, there's only a couple of names that stand out. Atti Baard, Dougal McDonald, Poons Prinsloo. But I ultimately went with Sean Sowerby, who played one test for South Africa against Samoa in 2002. It could have been more, possibly it should have been more, but again, you had the likes of Bob Skinstad, Joe van der Kerk, Andre Vos in the mix, who all played number 8 around that time at some point. So he never really got the opportunity. He left for France, and he became one of the all-time legends at Stade Francais, really cementing himself as a legend at that club. So he's somebody that, you know, could have played more tests for South Africa. I thought he was a pretty good number 8, you know, well-rounded player, strong carrier of the ball, fearless tackler. There were players that were better than him, I think, that kept him out of the box side, but it doesn't take away from his ability. I think he was a very good number 8. And on top of that, you know, Dougal McDonald is a familiar name, but my dad didn't think too highly of him, so I didn't even look at Dougal McDonald in this side. Okay, going on to the flankers. That's going to pack down next to Sean Sowerby. There's a couple. Des van Jaarsveld, Springbok captain, in only one test against Scotland in 1960. Skitter Bakker, Warren Brits. Ginger Clark, Tim Glulane, Kabamba Floors. There's a couple of other names, FCS Smith, Pierre Ace, and Piet Veldsman from 1977 as well. I ultimately went with Eben Janssen, who went on the 1981 tour. He made his test debut in that first test against New Zealand in Christchurch. Only played the one test. They brought back Rob Lowe for the second test. But Eben Janssen, again, hard grafter, a very, very solid player, played for Free State for many, many years. So I picked him on the one flank next to Basil Kenyon, which oddly enough, it's a very famous name. There's a stadium in East London named after him. And he will go down as one of the greatest Springboks of all time, not just from his playing days, but also from a coaching and administrative point of view. Oddly enough, he only ever played one test for the Springboks, and that was in 1949 against All Blacks. So very, very odd that a name like Basil Kenyon, which is so well remembered, has only played one test for South Africa. But those are the flankers that I'm going with, Eben Janssen and Basil Kenyon on the flanks. Going into the locking position, there's a couple of names. Johan de Bruin from 1974, Bram Els, who played one test against Australia in 1997, Stefan Levis, Franco van der Merwe, Piet van Zyl in 1961. There's a couple of names that stand out, but I went with Flip Geel, who played one test in 1949 against New Zealand, and Jason Jenkins, who played that one test against Wales in 2018. Flip Geel, for one reason and one reason only, he was Frick de Pree's hero. It's as simple as that. I've never seen him play. I didn't read up that much about him, but if somebody like Frick de Pree looked up to a player like Flip Geel, he must have been pretty decent. So that is purely the reason why I'm going with Flip Geel. And he packs down on the one lock. On the other side, I went with Jason Jenkins, who again I think is one of the more recent players that's unlucky to have not played more tests for South Africa. I think he's a very, very good player, decent talent, a strong carrier of the ball, defensively very good, set pieces very good. It's sad that he left the Bulls, being a Bulls fan myself. I think that combination between him and Lewitt and him and Ergies Snyman was really, really top notch. So yeah, I'd love to see him back in the Springbok jersey. So there we go, Flip Geel and Jason Jenkins in the locking position. Going into the front row at tight head, there's a couple of names. Martiens Becker is a famous name that stands out, almost deploy. But I went with a guy called Calvin Martin, who I don't think anybody would have heard of, but he went on that famous 1937 tour, which to this day is probably still the best side to leave South Africa to go and beat up the All Blacks in New Zealand. But just to give you a little bit of insights into who Calvin Martin was, besides representing South Africa on the rugby field, Lieutenant General Calvin Martin was also a military commander. He joined the South African Air Force in 1935. During World War II, he commanded three wing in North America, and in 1945 he commanded Group 4, which was responsible for transporting South African servicemen back home from Italy. So not only is he a Springbok, he's also a war hero who served us in World War II. So purely on that basis, I've got to go with Calvin Martin, although I've never seen him play and don't know that much about him. Okay, going on to the loosehead side of the scrum. Vian de Pree stands out more recently, Hoppie van Jaarsveld, but ultimately I went with Oxen Che, who also played in that one test against Wales in Washington in 2018. I love this guy. I think he's a very dynamic player. I'm glad that he moved away from the Cheetahs. I always feel bad for Cheetahs players or for the Cheetahs franchise when players leave, but I think for his career it's the right move to go to a franchise like the Sharks to show what he can do in Super Rugby. I think he's going to be back in the box side in no time. He's a very, very good player, strong, explosive runner, strong carrier of the ball, solid in the scrums. He does everything that is expected of a good loosehead, and I'd love to see him back in the box mix. I think he's one of the recent one-cap Springboks, which in due time he's gonna add to that tally of one. At hooker, there's a couple of names: Colin Kroon from 1955, Pandise Maku, Skaro Ntubeni, who made his debut last year. But I went with Mornay Visser, who played one test for South Africa in 1995 against Samoa before the World Cup. It's the only test that we played before the 95 World Cup, and he played in that game. He didn't start. He came on as a sub. Didn't really make a massive impact during that game, but I think at provincial level, he was a very decent player. Played for the Sharks, he played for Western Province. He was on the smaller side, very mobile type of hooker, but very strong at set piece. Lineouts was solid, and he played quite a number of seasons in top flight rugby in South Africa. So out of those 4 names, he was the one that really stood out. There wasn't a lot to choose from, but yeah, I went with Morné Visser. So that's it. That is my one-hit wonders Springbok side. Tell me what you think in the comments section below. Thank you for watching. Stay subscribed to our YouTube channel. Go and like us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. And remember to support us on Patreon. And we'll do this again next week. Cheers.